Emily had always been different. She didn't need words to express her thoughts or feelings. She had been born mute. But her silence was never a barrier between her and her mother, Sarah. Over the years, they had created their own language, a world where gestures, looks, and written notes bridged the gap. Sarah never felt as though she missed out on hearing her daughter's voice. Their bond was so strong that words seemed unnecessary. But over the past few months, Emily had changed. At 16, she had become more withdrawn than usual, retreating into her room for hours on end, clutching her childhood teddy bear, a worn, ragged thing she had kept since her father died. Sarah thought it was just part of growing up, the natural teenage rebellion or mood swings. She tried not to worry. But Emily wasn't just distant. There was something darker in her silence now, something that unsettled Sarah deeply. Sarah's brother-in-law, Jake, had always been close to the family. After Peter, Sarah's husband, had passed away, Jake had stepped in, helping with things around the house and making sure Sarah and Emily didn't feel the full weight of their loss. For years, Sunday dinners with Jake had been a comforting routine. He would show up with gifts, tell stories, and bring laughter into their home. He had been more than just a brother-in-law to Sarah. He was a lifeline during her darkest days. And for Emily, he had been like a second father. But lately, Emily's reaction to Jake's visits had changed. She no longer smiled at his jokes or ran to greet him when he arrived. She barely looked at him at all. At first, Sarah dismissed it as teenage angst, but as weeks passed, it became harder to ignore. Emily would sit silently through dinner, pushing her food around her plate, flinching when Jake touched her shoulder. Sarah had noticed it, but refused to confront the thought forming in the back of her mind. Jake had always been there for them. He was family. How could she suspect him of anything? One quiet morning, Sarah found an envelope on the kitchen table, addressed to her in Emily's handwriting. It wasn't unusual for Emily to leave notes. After all, it was how they communicated most of the time. But this one felt different. It was sealed, and there was something about the way Emily had placed it that made Sarah's heart beat a little faster. She opened it, expecting to find a typical note about her day or a small request for something Emily needed. Instead, her eyes scanned the lines, and her hands began to tremble. "Mom, I don't know how to tell you this, but Jake has been doing things that make me uncomfortable. He touches me when you're not looking. I don't know what to do anymore. Please don't leave me alone with him. I'm scared." The words burned into Sarah's mind, each sentence pulling her deeper into a pit of confusion and disbelief. Jake? Her Jake? The man who had been like a father to Emily, who had helped raise her after Peter's death. Sarah could barely breathe. This had to be a mistake. Emily was sensitive, she thought. Maybe Jake had done something innocent, and Emily, in her growing teenage anxiety, had misunderstood. But deep down, Sarah knew better. The fear in Emily's words was too real to dismiss. Still, she wanted to deny it. She had to. The alternative was too horrific to consider. For the rest of the day, Sarah felt like she was walking through a fog. Every time she thought about the letter, her chest tightened, and her mind screamed at her to do something, to act. But what could she do? Confront Jake? And say what? What if Emily was wrong? What if she accused him and destroyed their relationship over nothing? Sarah couldn't bear the thought of losing Jake. He had been her rock for so many years. Yet the idea of ignoring Emily's plea felt even worse. That evening, Jake came over for dinner, as he did every Sunday. Sarah's eyes followed his every move, every smile, every laugh. He was his usual self, charming and relaxed. But Emily, on the other hand, was not. She sat rigidly at the table, her eyes downcast, barely touching her food. When Jake reached out to pat her on the back, she flinched ever so slightly, but it was enough. Sarah saw it. The doubt, the fear, everything was there in that small, almost imperceptible movement. Dinner passed in a haze. Sarah barely tasted the food. Her mind was consumed with questions, doubts, and a growing sense of dread. She couldn't confront Jake now, not with Emily sitting there, her fear palpable. But she couldn't let this go either. She needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The next day, Sarah received a call from Emily's school. Emily had had an emotional breakdown during recess, refusing to talk to anyone, clinging to her teddy bear like a lifeline. The teacher asked if everything was all right at home. Sarah's heart dropped. She assured the teacher that she would speak to Emily and hung up, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. When she arrived home, Emily was sitting on her bed, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. Without a word, she handed Sarah a note, written in the same shaky handwriting as the first. "Mom, Jake put something in my teddy bear. I'm scared. Please don't tell him. Just look." Sarah's blood ran cold. She took the bear from Emily's hands, her heart pounding. It was the same bear Emily had clutched since she was a child, a symbol of comfort and safety. But now, it felt like a ticking time bomb in Sarah's hands. She hesitated for a moment, then ripped open the seams, her fingers trembling. Inside, hidden deep within the stuffing, was a small flash drive. Sarah stared at it, her mind reeling. What could this possibly mean? Why would Jake hide something in Emily's toy? With shaking hands, she plugged the drive into her computer and opened the files. What she saw made her stomach turn. Photos, videos, evidence of Jake's betrayal. He had been grooming Emily for months, slowly crossing boundaries while keeping his actions hidden from Sarah. The truth was worse than anything she could have imagined. Jake had violated their trust, had preyed on Emily's silence, using her vulnerability to hide his dark secret. Sarah collapsed into her chair, the weight of the discovery crashing down on her. Tears streamed down her face as she realized the extent of the damage. She had trusted Jake with everything, with her daughter's safety, with her own grief, and he had shattered that trust in the worst possible way. Without hesitation, Sarah called the police. Jake was arrested that afternoon, his carefully crafted facade crumbling as his secrets were exposed. As he was taken away in handcuffs, Sarah stood in the doorway, holding Emily close. The pain of betrayal was unbearable, but in that moment, she knew she had done the right thing. She had listened to her daughter when it mattered most. In the days that followed, Sarah and Emily began the long process of healing. Therapy helped Emily process the trauma, and Sarah worked to rebuild her relationship with her daughter. The guilt was heavy. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she should have seen the signs sooner, that she should have protected Emily from the start. But with time, they began to find peace. The house felt quieter now, but it was a different kind of silence. It was a silence filled with strength and healing, a silence that spoke louder than words ever could. Sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who betray us the deepest. But in the quiet moments, in the silence, the truth often reveals itself. It's important to listen to those we love, even when they can't speak their fears out loud. Trust your instincts and always protect what matters most.